My name is Licia Affer. I am the Canon to the Ordinary for this diocese. The Canon to the Ordinary is the Chief of Staff of the Bishop. So I represent the Bishop all over the diocese. We have 76 churches and 19 schools, and that's where I spend my time on Sundays. And that's what I worry about during all the rest of the week. So that's me today. I'm here today to talk about pastoral care. Okay, let's see if I can make this work. Yes! Pastoral care! Ta-da! When I say pastoral care, what do you think about? What comes to mind?
Pastor.
The pastor. Okay.
The hospital.
The hospital. Visiting. Taking care of others. No, clergy are not allowed to speak.
Being with people.
Being with people.
Taking care of others.
Taking care of others. Okay, excellent. So, pastoral care, let's see if this may not work at all. Pastoral care. The traditional definition of pastoral care being fully present, listening with a compassionate, non-controlling stance to an individual or a group for the purpose, conscious or unconscious, of representing Jesus to them and seeking to respond to their spiritual needs. That's a broad definition. Not everyone agrees, but that's a good definition in my book. Being fully present. We are offering pastoral care when we are there. Okay? And we are listening, and not just listening in a generic way, which is often what we do. Like, we're listening and we're preparing a response, but we are fully engaged. We are listening to understand and to know the other person better. In a non-controlling stance, we are not trying to move the conversation somewhere where we are comfortable or where we want to go because we have some kind of agenda. We can be fully present doing pastoral care to an individual, one-on-one, or to a group of people. And for us Christians, pastoral care is connected with being witnesses. So representing Jesus to the other person as we seek to respond to their spiritual needs. Because sometimes we think that doing pastoral care means getting them a glass of water, or changing the bed sheet at the hospital, or straightening up the pillows, or whatever, right? So we can go into that too, but our intent is to respond to their spiritual needs. Now, wrong button. Oh, this is so sad. This is going to be interesting. Yes. Now, do I need to be a pastor to do pastoral care?
No.
No, why not?
We are all ministers.
Ministers.
That's a good point. We're all ministers, but also remember, right? We're listening with a compassionate heart, with a compassionate stance. We can all do that. Yes? Let's see if I can make the other thing happen. Do I need to be trained to offer pastoral care?
So yes.
You do a little better. Hopefully.
It's helpful. It's helpful. Yes. There are some people who have gifts of pastoral care that come from God Almighty, and that's wonderful. Sometimes, though, in an effort to be very present to the other person, in an effort to help the other person, we may say the wrong thing, right? Or we may project with our body, with our stance, something that we don't really want to project. And so it is helpful to be trained. It is helpful to be focused and mindful, right? And we can do that in a variety of ways. Community of Hope International. There are many different ways in which we learn how to offer pastoral care. In the Episcopal Church, one of the most broad spread, if you want, is Stephen's Ministries. Have you heard of Stephen's Ministries? If you ask around the church, you will hear that there are many faith communities that use that model. Community of Hope International is another model of training people to offer pastoral care. Not better, not worse, just different. I happen to love Community of Hope, and I have been a part of Community of Hope for many years, which is why Charlie invited me here to talk to you about it. And one of the reasons why I love Community of Hope is because it's based in Benedictine Spirituality, and I will tell you everything about it later. So Community of Hope as an organization was born in 1994 when I can never remember her title, when the Assistant Director of Pastoral Care at St. Luke's Hospital in Houston, Texas, Helen Appleberg, tried to figure out a way of training people, supporting people who were not ordained, who had not gone to seminary, who had not taken classes and CPE courses and all that stuff, to be listeners and to be present to others in the way that we usually consider pastoral. So she wanted to create what in certain environments are called lay chaplains, because she was working at a hospital. And today, so that was 1994. Today there are 125 centers for Community of Hope. Some of them are in the United States, some in Canada. There are a couple in Africa. And so Community of Hope has now become Community of Hope International. And different regions have different coordinators. And so if we get to that point, you will be contacted by a regional coordinator and all that. Just to say that this is not just the Count of the Ordinary coming in and telling you this thing, but that there are others who are already doing it. The mission statement of Community of Hope is creating communities steeped in Benedictine spirituality to serve others through compassionate listening. Compassionate listening, what we were saying before, right? Without trying to guide the conversation. Listening, as Benedict said, with the ears of our heart. And that's what makes it so valuable to me, because it starts with creating communities. No one does pastoral care in a vacuum. The first thing that a Community of Hope group does is build community, and then stay in community. So that throughout the entire journey, the training, yes, the commissioning, yes, but then also the living out of that desire to do pastoral care, they're never alone. There is always community. My first encounter with Community of Hope was at All Saints Episcopal Church and Day School in Phoenix, Arizona. And their Community of Hope team was composed of initially 10 people, and then it grew. And the kind of relationships that were built within the community were absolutely the strength of it. And the Community of Hope team there was modeling a way of being in intentional Christian community for the rest of the parish. So even people who were not interested in becoming Community of Hope pastoral caregivers were noticing the way in which they were in relationship with each other, and they were following their example. So a Community of Hope team, a Community of Hope community, can have a great impact in the church, in the faith community in which they operate, because they model a certain kind of behavior that is based on Benedictine spirituality. I am not going to spend time telling you about St. Benedict, because today you all know everything about St. Francis, and I don't want to be a distraction. But Benedictine Spirituality appeals to me because there is a rule of life, right? Which is good for a person like me. I need to have a rule of life, don't we all? And it's a very gentle rule. And I find it very helpful. Because I don't know about you, but I'm a sinner. And so I need a lot of kindness because I'm not very kind to myself. So the rule helps me with that. Compassionate hospitality of the heart. Compassion means to suffer with, to feel with. We can be present to other people. We can be with them, feeling whatever they're feeling together, right? We can bring them into ourself, into our life, into our world, into our experience, hospitality. And it's hospitality of the heart. We're not taking anybody home, right? We're taking them within us, which is hard work. That's why you need community. It's not something you can do by yourself. Sit there. So, there is a training. And the training happens in modules. And I'm going to show you my folder. My folder goes back to 2013. And in the folder, there are my modules. And I'm going to tell you which modules you have for the training. One module on Benedictine Spirituality. The idea is that it can be a module a week. It's usually one module per month or two. Benedictine Spirituality because it's the grounding, right? It's the root of the spirituality of this enterprise. Theology of Pastoral Care. What it is, why we do it, why it makes sense in a Christian environment. Pastoral identity. Who am I as a pastor, as a compassionate listener to another people, and how I am changed by doing that. Every time I listen to another person in a compassionate way, every time I hear the story, I am changed. So that's an important module. Listening skills, because we all think we're excellent listeners, and we really are not. So that is a good part of the training, right? How to really listen, as Benedict says, with the ears of our heart. Prayer, Christian meditation, and silence, because listening is hard. And it takes a lot out of us. And the stories that we hear and that we make our own, we then carry. And so it's important to have some resources we can draw from and places of the Spirit where we can go when we're carrying that heavy load with another person. So prayer, Christian meditation, and silence. Motivational spiritual gifts. Have you ever done a motivational spiritual gift inventory here? You know that the Holy Spirit gives to us different gifts. You know this, right? It's important for us to explore which gifts we have been given. And those gifts change because the gifts are always given when they're needed. So it's important to spend some time looking at the gifts of the Spirit and figuring out which ones were bestowed upon us and how we can use them as pastoral caregivers. Pastoral visit, and then we go into the practicality of it all. How do we go and visit? What are the boundaries? What is ours to do, and what is someone else's job or ministry or mission to do? And then there's some practice there. Usually the members of Community of Hope go visit someone, right? Now we're halfway through the training. We go visit, we shadow a trained pastoral caregiver Or we shadow the pastor sometimes, and we pay attention, we learn, and then we come home and we spend some time thinking about it. Okay. Important to know, confidentiality, first practice visit, and debriefing. A member of Community of Hope, whenever they go and visit, whether it's in a hospital, whether it's in a home, whether it's in a prison, whether it's a visit that just happens because you're walking down the street and somebody asks you for $1, and instead of moving away and going back, you decide to stay and have a conversation with the person. That's pastoral care, right? So it may happen in a structured way, it may just happen. It may be, your third cousin 3 times removed who needs to talk, and you realize that what you're doing is providing pastoral care because you are fully present, listening, representing Jesus to them, right? Because that's the point. They needed to feel that you're there, but also that Jesus is there. So how do we do that? And then how do we debrief? Because in Community of Hope, there's always someone else, another member of the community we can go and talk to. And we share the content of our visit. And we say, okay, this is what happened. This was the conversation we had. And this is how I felt. And this is how I'm feeling now, right? So that we don't carry the load on our own. Community of Hope is a lay-led ministry. Father Tim, Canon Licia, we're not going to tell you how to do it. It's lay-led. It's an intentional Christian community where people make the choice of responding to the love of God by offering pastoral care. And as an intentional Christian community, we support each other. And that's also part of the training. How do I respond to another pastoral caregiver who's had a very difficult visit? And how can I offer pastoral care to them, right? Sometimes it will be very heavy, very heavy. And there will be a desire to talk to a clergy person. Because some stuff within us, in our life, in our story, will emerge. Once I had a pastoral visit with someone, very dear parishioner of mine, and her daughter came in, and I realized, and started talking to me, and I realized that I was becoming very upset. I kept my cool, I think, right? I stayed in the moment, I listened to everything that was going on, but I realized that there was something within me that was not okay. I was so annoyed at this daughter of my parishioner. She was doing nothing wrong. She was taking a lot of airtime though. And so at the end of the visit, I called one of my lay pastoral caregivers in Community of Hope and I said, hey, I need to debrief. I really need to debrief because I had this weird visit. And that was somebody who had already offered pastoral care to the same parishioner before as a member of Community of Hope. And I debriefed and a lot of stuff came up and eventually I took my stuff to my spiritual director. I don't debrief with my parishioners. But I wanted to understand exactly the circumstances of my visit and why things felt off to me. So I ended up debriefing the visit with her, and then I took my stuff to my spiritual director to go deeper. Because that is what we need to do for each other, right? Support. So, a whole module about that. Understanding family systems. I'm not even going to go into that because that's my hobby horse, my thing. I can talk about family systems for 5 hours straight. I'm actually going to a 3-day super intensive seminar on family system theory next week. But the long and the short of it is that we don't move in a vacuum. Wherever we go, we bring our family. And we need to be aware of how we live out our relationships with the world outside based on the relationship that we have built or that we have inherited in our own family of origin. And so we spend one module looking at ourselves in the context of our family. I'm gonna tell you this. Okay. I love my mother-in-law. She's one of the most generous people I know. Okay? The second most generous person I know is my husband, who got it all from his mom. Okay? So just to tell you, they're both much more generous than I am. Just instinctively. Just right there. But she's my mother-in-law. Do I have to say more? One day I went to a conference, a clergy conference. And I'm in the middle of, this group of clergy and everyone's talking, blah, blah, blah. And there's this person talking, saying things, being present to others. We're just having a chat. And I just didn't like her. And I didn't know her. Why? Why don't I like you, nice person? Everybody else seems to like you. What's my problem with you? And then at the end of the day, when I went back to my hotel room and I did a little of, soul searching, I realized that she reminded me of my mother-in-law. Shame on me. As soon as I came home, I called my mother-in-law and we had a lovely conversation because I was feeling so bad. But they had a couple of things that they do the same way, and just as my mother-in-law annoys me when she does that, this poor woman, a colleague, a sister in ministry, right, was doing them too. And I couldn't understand why. They were rubbing me the wrong way. See? Family systems. Grief, coping with loss. One of the things that we do the most as pastoral caregivers is being present to another person when they're going through grief. And I don't have to tell you, right now, we're all going through grief, aren't we? It's not direct grief, it's not, I've lost my mom or my sister or my spouse or whatever. It's a grief of the world. Loss can be loss of a job, loss of a house when we move somewhere else, loss of a situation, loss of our relationship. We all go through loss in so many different ways. So it's important that when we embark in the journey of being present to loss, we explore the losses in our own life and how we react to those losses. And then we start thinking about loss in a way that is maybe slightly different, so that we don't bring our own loss into our listening moment of pastoral care. So, coping with loss. Pastoral care for seniors. In our congregation, so often the older members of the congregation are the ones that we don't see that much, especially now with COVID. So many people are still afraid of coming back to the communities. And they may like to have a visit. They may like to have someone go to their house and spend time with them. We need to be mindful of situations. We need to know what to look for, and we need to be mindful of boundaries. Which, by the way, before I forget, remember, if you decided to become a lay pastoral care giver, a visitor, you needed to be to do safe church training, because there are rules. Pastoral care. And then there's a second practice visit. And if everything goes well with that second practice visit, you are all taken care of. And then a big module on care for the caregiver. Because sometimes we forget to pay attention to the spouse of the patient, the mother of the patient, the daughter of the patient, right? Sometimes we're called into a situation, and we focus our attention to the identified patient, and we don't think about the other people who revolve around that. I'm just telling you all my stuff today. Clergy, when we're in seminary, we have to do a module of clinical pastoral education, CPE, also called boot camp for future priests. So we spend 10 weeks assigned either to a retirement community, hospice, hospital, whatever, where we hone our pastoral skills, or so we hope. Where did you do your CPE, Father Tim?
Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis.
Oh, wow. Hard to be doing that in a children's hospital. I was at New York Presbyterian, the Columbia campus up there. And I was in my cohort, I was the only one who spoke Spanish. So I got all the calls. It was, sorry? Jacksonville. Wow.
Jackson.
Oh, Jackson, here.
Yeah.
Oh, God bless you. Tough crowd there, right? I'm sure.
It was interesting.
Yeah. Why am I telling you this? Because I want to tell you something. Yes. So it turns out in my CPE that I was obsessed, without knowing it, I was obsessed with care for the caregiver. So I would go visit people, patients in the hospital, room by room, as we have to do for our CPE time. And I would always seek out the caregivers, the family member, and spend the time with them in the hallway talking with them. And because in CPE you have to prepare then a verbatim of your visit, right? Word by word, because they want to make sure that you are listening, right? And so they prepare you to do that by telling you will have to write down every single thing that happened. Most of my verbatims had to do more with the caregiver than with the patient itself. And so my trainer noticed that pattern before I did. And so she said, I think we need to talk about your story, about your life, to see why, to see where, to see when, maybe, you were a caregiver. And I'm like, and I didn't receive any care. And she went, bingo, right? So see what happens? We bring our own self into our ministry.
Right.
And that's why the modules are so helpful. That's why the training is so helpful. Because you look at yourself and who you are and what your story is. And it's beautiful. And it gives you the strength and the courage to do this ministry. And it's also a good way for yourself to know when you're bringing too much of you into the relationship with the person you're giving care to. So that's it. And then, if you decide that this is the right ministry for you, if you decide that this works for you, you will make a commitment to this ministry. And actually, Father Tim will commission you on Sunday morning, in the middle of a Sunday morning liturgy, because you want the rest of the community at St. Thomas to pray for you, to support you, to be present to you, and to know who you are. Because now you're trained, and you may end up doing pastoral care at coffee hour on a Sunday morning. You never know. Questions so far about anything I have said? Because I speak honest. I don't want to keep you here too long.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for being here.
I'll watch the rest on the recording.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate it.
One of the things that I've noticed with loss, especially recently, is the loss of a dream or an aspiration or the thought of how the life was going to go.
Hope.
And that can be a very, very devastating loss, and they don't know how to identify it because it doesn't have a name.
Yes. You know, it occurs to me that the training at this time will be even more valuable for us, for all of us, because it's a shared experience. It's a shared experience. And it's important that we elaborate that loss, that we process our loss, so that when we enter into conversation with another person, we don't bring that in. And it's been hard because we couldn't be together. It's been very hard for people like me and Father Tim, because we recognize the need to have a small group of people where we can talk about loss. And it's been so hard to do this during COVID. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's hard everywhere. It's hard in families, it's hard in work communities, it's hard in churches, it's hard everywhere. And if you compound that to personal direct loss, right? The loss of a friend or a family member, and some of the choices we still have to make, just the loss of seeing people without their mask. I feel the loss of not seeing your faces, right? And we don't. and we don't have a name for it. We're not used to spending time reflecting on that and elaborating that, and then it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
How much of this involves like social work? Because most of the time when you meet someone in those situations, they need money, they need a job, they need injunction from their husband, they need some social work, really.
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about today.
What do you do in that situation?
You refer to the appropriate people, as you will learn in your module. You get resources. You refer to the priest also, right? Who can then refer to the appropriate resources. This is a ministry of listening. And you will find that is the first thing that people need. You will find that more often than not, your listening will be enough, because it's exactly what people need. I don't know if you ever had that experience, but so often in my life, I'm ready with my little dollar to give to the person on the street, right? And I know they will take the dollar. But so often the difference between what I have to offer and, the passerby who just gives them the dollar and bill, is that whenever I can, I stop and I say, hey, how are things? Are you doing okay? What's going on here? And they talk. And that talking makes all the difference. And it happens. Okay. This happened yesterday to me. Yesterday morning. My husband, COVID took away my husband's best friend. Best man at our wedding. In Italy. I think he had already received his first vaccine. It was like, oh yeah, it's nothing, I'm gonna go upstairs and self-quarantine and all that. It went downhill fast. He was intubated for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Wow.
Long as we lost him. His wife, Chiara, and I actually built a stronger relationship throughout this. But on the phone, I live here. She lives in Bergamo, in the north of Italy, okay? On the phone. And yesterday she told me that she has a friend, and they were close. And last week this friend told her, Chiara, I'm sorry I don't call you as much as before, but it's really hard to be with you right now. Which I completely understand. It's horrible to be with someone who's just lost her husband, and they have a small child. Just lost her husband. And this woman was not being mean. She was not trying to be hurtful. She just acknowledged the fact that she is not equipped to be present to Chiara at this time. I am. Not very well. And I make a mess of things all the time. But I have some training. And I know what to do when Chiara needs to talk to me and tell me stories and so on. So the first thing is I send my husband away because it hurts him and he is not equipped. And I take the phone and I listen. And I'm fully present to her. Right? And then I call my spiritual director because I cannot carry that all by myself. Her friend, she doesn't have the equipment, she doesn't have the training, and she doesn't have a spiritual director, so she doesn't know where to go with this. So she carries the grief and the loss, and she doesn't know what to do with it, right? So Community of Hope creates a repository, if you want, where we elaborate these things, right? Members of Community of Hope meet at least once a month to be together, to pray together, and to talk about what's going on. And members of Community of Hope make a vow to read a portion of the Rule of Benedict with a commentary every day. And they build up their spirituality. And they grow and they are transformed by this holy work together. Because at the end of the day, the Christian life, in my opinion, is building awareness of self so that we can become more and more like Jesus. Because remember, he said, when 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I will be also. So when we enter a room, willing and able to offer pastoral care in the name of Jesus, Jesus will be there also. So we are literally bringing Jesus into the situation and into the relationship. Growing and deepening together. That's what members of Community of Hope do. By worshiping together, by expanding their knowledge with continuing education, by engaging in peer supervision, right, with the debriefing, by reporting visitation information, so that if someone cannot be there, another member of the community can step in. By reflecting on pastoral experiences in a debriefing, and by deepening their sense of community. The hope is that we can be as close as possible to the communities we read about in the book of Acts, right? Where things were shared in common, where people were praying and worshiping together, where people were sharing meals and experiences. That's it. Questions?
When does the next cohort begin?
Charlie?
We haven't really decided. I mean, the point is, it's a matter of what we thought we would do is that myself, Cindy, who is going to be taking over for Peter in terms of pastoral care, that we would try to identify a third person so we would have a tripod of people there who could act as the liaison and also the communicants. And then would have people that are going to be seriously interested in this and willing to and have the time to devote themselves to the training, to go through and spend the necessary time.
Are you working with other parishes to?
Not at this point. Not as yet. There are other Community of Hopes in Florida. There's one it's north.
Yes, Montevideo.
Right.
So in Florida, there are 2 other, in the state of Florida, there are 2 other Community of Hope. I want to bring Community of Hope to the Diocese of Southeast Florida. So when I was approached, I was literally jumping up and down. I'm like, yay, we can do it. So what I am going to do for sure is call the coordinator for this region to say, oh, by the way, I've been doing a presentation about Community of Hope, even though really I'm not, the Community of Hope person. And I think this person is going to say, well, you spared me a trip to Coral Gables. I'm going to offer all the support I can And I'm very invested in St. Thomas having a community of hope, because then I can send people to you.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do at this point is for you and I and Cindy to
Yeah.
probably get on the phone and just set up like a monthly meeting, a Zoom meeting to talk, and until we can identify a third person. And if there are people who are seriously, who want to become engaged in this, go through the training and develop their own form of ministry, then we can essentially engage and start them on the training.
So Bernice is here. But and Bernice is.
And you're volunteering, Bernice.
No,
Is this your spouse?
No.
Oh, because
Well, we're
usually
really
that's
good
what
friends.
spouses do.
No,
right?
no, no,
No,
we're friends.
but Bernice actually today belongs to a different parish. And this is St. Faith's in, what is it, Cutler Bay, right?
Other way.
And so, but of course, she's a great friend of St. Thomas too. She sings with us and we're really good friends outside of church. So I'm saying this because we already have a person who's here, came interested in, to meet you and to listen to what you were talking about. And I'm thinking connecting a couple of churches in this area would be an interesting thing.
Oh my goodness.
Charlie, just thinking
She'll be trying to get me to join.
to build a bigger, slightly bigger group. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I think the thing to do, Juan, is for you and I probably to connect later this week and we can talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. There are. I mean, St. Faith's would be a place we could approach if we wanted to get a larger group. I know Church of the Ascension has been closed, if I'm not mistaken, for a little while, but they're very active as well. So there, if you choose to go beyond this parish, there are other churches in the near vicinity. that
I
would
see
be
no
interested.
reason why we shouldn't. I was just thinking
Neither.
trying to get a solid foundation here.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of
and
course.
before we start, getting
Yeah.
to diffuse.
It can be within the context of a parish. It can be like a geographical cluster.
Yeah.
So pre-COVID, the idea was to have a community of hope in each parish. Simply because the training was happening in person, and it was much easier, right, to do it this way. And also because part of the idea is that on Sunday mornings, members of Community of Hope worship together. Now, a lot of things have changed because of COVID. Training can happen on Zoom, right? And if you have two or three members in one parish, and they worship together anyway, right? So it can be. I think that right now there is a little more flexibility. We need to get in touch with the regional coordinator to really try and understand. Usually there is much less clergy presence in the process than what I expected to do here, because we're really starting it as a diocese, right? And if it works here, whether here is St. Thomas or whether here is a cluster of churches, then we can talk to other churches in the diocese. And there are presentations, there are training modules on videos right now, but like for years, I've done the Benedictine Spirituality presentation, I've done Pastoral Identity, your rector here can do one, because he is trained. Maybe the one on confidentiality often comes from a clergy person, so we can talk. And then, yeah. And if you are interested in Benedictine spirituality, by the way, you can get the rule with the commentary and start reading it for your own personal spiritual development.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Charlie, do you know how to get hold of me?
Not yet.
Okay.
But he will in 2 minutes.
I know, right?
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna say, sorry. Oh, thank you. I'm gonna say one more thing. Don't,
The
one more
encore.
thing. In my former parish, someone went through the training with Community of Hope, was commissioned, and she was all gung ho about it. After the commissioning, she took a month to do some personal discernment. Then she came into my office and said, you know what? I prayed about it, I thought about it, I did some stuff with my spiritual director. I don't feel called to go visit people at home, at the hospital, at the whatever. And I said, okay, that's fair, that's fine. She said, you know, I think I'm called to something else. Okay. She said, I think I'm called to be a resource for caregivers of patients with memory loss, dementia or Alzheimer. Okay, that's huge. And so she talked to me, she told me a little more of her personal story, etc. And for a year, she went and visited facilities for Alzheimer patients. She talked to doctors and nurses. She built a library of resources. She became our person. So if anyone at the church called me to say, you know, mom is beginning to show signs, blah, 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 I would just say, this is the name of the person, this is her phone number, talk to her. And she had, in that sense, see what happened? Not only she was listening, but she also had resources. And she would just say, because that's one of those situations where you literally don't know where to turn, right? You don't even know what the first step is. And she would just go, here, right? The book, the folder, the whatever, right? Here, right? And she would collect also stories from other people so she could say, this particular facility, this particular thing, this particular book, this particular center, etc. After a year and 3 months, I think, more or less, she came to my office and said, I thought about it, I prayed about it, I talked to my spiritual director, I'm done with this ministry, and now I have to discern what my next step is. I consider that one of the most beautiful things that ever happened in my life as a priest. So community of hope can be training that then you use anywhere and everywhere in a variety of different situations, in a work experience. That once you have the training, you can become, in a way, almost the chaplain, right? The pastoral caregiver in your office. You don't have to wear a tag that says, well, now I'm here to listen to you. But you see how easy that can become? One of my community of hope people in Phoenix was a hospice nurse. She said, I don't have the time or the energy or the capacity to go visit anybody else. I work crazy hours in a hospice. And I said, well, you already have your place. You don't need more. You are already being a lay pastoral caregiver where you are. It's okay. It's enough. Right. And then a couple of years ago, she retired and she became more active in the parish and in the neighborhood in that way. So, just for you to know, it's not directly, but I can tell you the director at All Saints started drawing leaders from Community of Hope. Vestry members, ministry chairs and all that. Why? Because they were trained to listen. They were trained to be present. Can you imagine a vestry made of you laugh, but can you imagine what kind of gift that is for a congregation? People who are trained to really listen to each other, people who are working on their own spirituality. So, okay, I'm done. Now you can clap.